Welcome to the bonfire, unkindled one.
Hey everyone, it's Blue Lizard Jello, and welcome back to Everything Possible in Dark Souls 3. Last time, we went through the Catacombs of Carthus, we encountered a number of skeletons, and then we finally took down their leader, the High Lord Wolnir. Today, we will be continuing along the path that we actually opened up just before High Lord Wolnir and heading into the Smouldering Lake, but before we do that, let's get some preparations going. Selling our souls as usual. Pick up a few items before our adventure, including some gold pine bundles. A couple more homeward bone because they're always nice to have on hand, and actually we're going to need them in this episode. And then some feather arrows so I can pull enemies from a greater range.
Ashen one.
Next, you can see I am using a different weapon. Let's take a look at what it is and what we're going to be doing with it.
Well met. Just what neat.
First, let's reallocate some of our Estus. And you can see that I'm using the Astora Greatsword, so let's see just how high we can get this upgraded before we head out. Now we have it up to +4, and now let's take a look at infusions and see if we can get any more attack rating out of it. So I've gone through and actually calculated the total attack rating for the Astora Greatsword with a number of infusions. Regular, the attack rating is 246, heavy is 240, the sharp infusion will give me 252, and the refined infusion will give me 260. The only reason I'm taking the time to show this off is to let you know that not all weapons and not all infusions are created equal. So dependent on your stat spread, the weapon, and the type of infusion you are trying to go for will dictate what type of infusion is going to be best for your particular situation. In this case, because I want a flat damage, I don't want anything split, the refined infusion is definitely going to be the best option.
Pretty be careful.
Next, I'm going to head over to Arena. There is one spell that I'm going to want for this episode, although I'll tell you right now, a bit of a spoiler alert, it is utterly useless for what I intended to use it for. And that would be the medium heal. Restore moderate HP for self and those in the vicinity. So my plan is actually not to use this to heal myself, but to actually use it to heal an NPC summon that I'll be using for the boss fight. You can see I do need 15 faith, but we'll be rectifying that very shortly.
Have a pleasant journey, champion.
And before we actually head off, let's go ahead and talk to the Firekeeper, spend what souls we have remaining.
Welcome home, Ashen Ones. Very well. Then touch the darkness within me. Take.
And you can see we have enough for 4 levels. So we'll put 3 points into Vigor to get our health up to 764 and 1 point into Faith so we can use our Medium Heal Miracle.
Farewell, Ashen One.
But now, before we head out, let's take a look at the gear. As you can see, we now have the refined Astora Greatsword +4, the Black Bow of Ferris, along with the feather arrows for that superior range, the Sunlight Talisman for casting the Medium Heal Miracle. Also, you can see that unlike the chimes that we've used in the past, this has the Unfaltering Prayer. When you use this skill, your poise will be increased so you can actually get those miracles cast without being interrupted, or at least it's a little bit more difficult to be interrupted. Once again, doesn't actually help me today. We have the Nameless Knight Helm, the Herald Armor, Mirror Gloves, and Iron Leggings for our Fashion Souls, and the Life Ring, Carthus Milk Ring, Chloranthy Ring, and the Lloyd's Sword Ring. Estus Flask, Ashen Estus Flask, Green Blossom, Human Pine Resin for the dark damage, and the Gold Pine Bundle for the added electric damage that we'll just be using a couple times in this run. And here are my stats. So if you want to take a look at anything in particular, go ahead and pause the video now. Now let's burn that undead bone shard that we collected in the catacombs. Make sure that we attune the spell we want, which in this case is just our medium heal. And now let's head out. Now I started in the Catacombs of Carthus instead of the High Lord Wolnir bonfire because I want to actually go and talk to Henri before we head down to the Smouldering Lake. And I also wanted to show that you can actually beat this boulder down if you start running as soon as you spawn at the bonfire. Not that you couldn't have just waited a few more seconds. I had a lot of fun using the historic greatsword, and of course a lot of you have already used this before because it is a great weapon in PvE and in PvP because of the immense range, plus you also have a nice varied moveset because you do have both slash and thrust attacks. You can see that Henri is still waiting for us, so let's go talk to him.
Oh, hello. We meet again. Have you seen Horace anywhere?
Well, yes, actually. In fact, if you just take a couple of steps over, I can show you him.
Oh, yes, I see. I've searched high and low with no luck. Perhaps
He has, but really not far, trust me.
Oh, Horace. Where have you run off to?
Really, Henri.
Oh,
I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I can see him.
have you abandoned me? No. What a horrible thought.
Okay, well, I guess it's up to us to go and actually locate Horace for him. But now that we're here, let's go ahead and cut the bridge, turn it into a ladder, and we can start making our way down towards him. Bear in mind that this does take a little while to actually turn into a ladder, and if you try to rush it right now, there's a good chance that you will actually fall. Also, if you do have the Silver Cat Ring or the Spook Sorcery, you can make this drop without any fall damage. It is survivable, I have tested it. Sometimes I do like to troll you, and this is not one of those times. Probably. And now we have quite the dangerous room. We have a large fire demon right here, similar to the one that we fought with Siegward. And then just over directly, we'll use the binoculars to get a better view, we have a chest. And if you watch very carefully, you can see it breathing. And that is a mimic. Now, you can use this mimic to your advantage, because mimics apparently have a long-standing hatred with demons. So we're going to attempt to get the mimic to do our dirty work for us. So let's get this fire demon breathing his fire. Now I'm going to smack the mimic with a fist. I just want to do minimal damage just to awaken him. And now we run. And the goal is to get the mimic's aggro turned to the demon. Sometimes this works very, very well. Other times, the mimic gets killed incredibly quickly, and that is a shame. So not only do we now have one dead mimic with very little damage actually done to the demon, but we also have some white eye skeletons to deal with. Now the skeletons can and will also damage the demon, but their damage is a bit less, so unless you can get several on him at once, you're probably going to see the demon kill the skeletons instead, which I guess is also not really a bad thing. And we got a kukri from him. Now it's time to start doing some damage. And somehow, I completely missed that hitbox, and this is where things really start going bad. Very large AoE here. That does cover most of the floor, so you're going to want to get out of there as soon as you see him charging that attack. You can see here just how large that hitbox is, and the amount of damage you take is very substantial. Another large AoE attack. This time I was just far enough, but now I have some skeletons on my tail. Let's see if the skeletons are going to do any of the work for us. And lo and behold, because the demon is actually focused on me, the skeletons are able to get a couple of hits in. And that's fine by me. Oh no, another large AoE. If only Siegward were here. Just one hit after another. And another. But finally, the fire demon goes down. And this time we actually get a soul of a demon. Now if you consume this, you'll get 20,000 souls, or you can use it to transpose with Ludlith and turn it into the demon's great axe or the demon's fist. Demons were born of the chaos flame, but the flame has not survived, and the demons are a dying race. And we'll see more evidence about the demons actually dying off later in this episode when we take down the boss. But now, as to what the Mimic dropped. The Black Blade, and I have something to say about this Black Blade, and something that I actually haven't seen connected anywhere else. So you can see this is a katana, does moderate damage, it has the bleed effect. That's not really what I want to talk about. The Black Blade, while it's the shortest katana, this is a callback to Dark Souls 2, where it was known as the Berserker Blade, which was used by the Mad Warriors. If you take a look at the description of the Black Blade, it states that a short katana wielded by the swordsman and distinguished guest of High Lord Wolnir. Whereas in Dark Souls 2, once you've killed the Mad Warrior enough and you start to collect pieces of his armor, you'll actually read that the Mad Warrior was one of King Vendrick's esteemed guests. So this is really interesting. We now have the Black Blade and the Berserker Blade, which are the same thing, and the armor set of the wielder of the Berserker Blade and the Black Blade both indicate that they are guests of either King Vendrick or High Lord Wolnir. I'm actually going to theorize that King Vendrick and High Lord Wolnir are either synonymous with each other, or they might actually have a direct connection. Is High Lord Wolnir King Vendrick reincarnated? I'm not sure. Although, there's another piece of equipment we'll get when we're down in Smouldering Lake that might actually suggest that that's the case. But enough theories for now. We'll talk a little bit more about it later on. Now let's head into the room that has a number of respawning skeletons. Large Titanite shard on this corpse. Now we'll start dealing with some more of the white-eyed skeletons. And this skeleton dropped a scimitar for us. This weapon, like a few others in the game, if you hold it in the left hand, it can actually be used to parry, and it has a pretty quick parry window. It does receive an S scaling in dexterity once you actually get it to a plus 10 upgrade and infuse it with sharp. So for a dexterity weapon, really not too bad. Large soul of a nameless soldier over here, and then just a few more skeletons to deal with. I do like the charge R2 on this weapon because of its immense range, plus it's able to take them down in a single hit, which is very beneficial. It looks like this one has come up one last time, and this should do it. And we get another scimitar. Descending further below, nice big bright shiny straight ahead. And on this corpse we get both the Old Sage's blindfold and the Witch's ring. Attire of pyromancers of the Great Swamp particularly favored by Old Sages. This blindfold actually belongs to Cornyx, and we'll get the rest of his armor set later on if we meet a particular requirement. As for the Witch's ring, this is an enormous pyromancy damage boost. This will give you an extra 25% to your pyromancy damage, and it does stack with the Great Swamp Ring. However, it does not boost any self or weapon buffs that you might get from a pyromancy flame. lighting this bonfire and resting since there are no enemies in between us and the next section that we need to worry about respawning. And we can start dipping into the Smouldering Lake. Now, if you've watched my live Let's Play of this game, you might have actually seen the pretty interesting thing that happened when I first came to Smouldering Lake. It was completely empty, and the textures were broken. So there were no enemies, there was no ballista firing giant arrows that we hear off to my right, and there was no giant Carthus sandworm. In fact, all the textures were a bit muddied, as if they were very low res, but the items were still here. I actually thought that FromSoft had made a mistake and completely forgot to finish this area. It wasn't until afterwards that I re-verified my game's integrity to find that 1.3 gigabytes of data had not been installed correctly. So my first experience here was actually pretty lackluster. But I digress. We have a triple ballista overlooking this entire area, which means that until we're able to turn that off, everywhere we go in this section, we're going to have to worry about dodging those giant arrows. So what I like to do is get the ballista to hit this tree. Come on. Go ahead and fire. Still? No? I'm right here. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. Just do it already. I'm right here. I'm not going to attempt an Arnold impression. There's one. There's two. And there's three. And now we can start looting. We have a large Titanite shard here. Let's get back to relative safely. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Now we go. Now, if you actually tilt the camera up, you can get a good idea of when they're coming in, and you can actually dodge your rolls based on visual cues. We have another large Titanite shard. There's the third. Let's run and get this next item, which is actually another large Titanite shard, which is fine, because getting these upgrade materials is hugely beneficial. Now, from behind this tree, we have the ballista up to the right, and we have this odd-looking wall over to the left. There is a shiny behind this wall, and the only way to get it is to actually get the ballista to break this wall down. So we're going to get over to this corner. If we take a hit, no big deal. We'll just top off our health, and now we're going to stand in front of the wall to get the ballista's attention. And dodge. And now when we turn around and look, the item is now free. Now you can pick up your very own speckled stone plate ring. Tried to make that sound way more exciting than it actually is. This is not a terrible ring. It does increase your magic, fire, lightning, and dark absorption, but only by 5%. What's interesting is that the description is almost an exact word-for-word copy of the description from the same ring in Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, you got this as a quest reward from helping out Siegward of Katarina. I wonder if we're supposed to make any connections to Siegward, Siegward, and Katarina based on the ring's description. I actually thought I'd be safe, but no such luck. There is one more section that we want the ballista to destroy before we actually proceed, because we will be turning it off eventually, although not in this episode. You can see here we have a number of giant crabs. Now, at least one of these crabs is actually non-hostile, and there is nothing unique that they drop. You can get upgrade materials, but most part, it's really not even worth it to take them out, in my opinion. I'm going to do so just for the sake of completion, but at some point I promise I am going to speed this video up so you don't have to sit through killing 7 or 8 of these crabs. You can see there that once I actually got the crab staggered, I was able to use a gold pine bundle to increase my damage before the critical attack. The gold pine bundles, or any of the bundles for that matter, are used extremely quickly, so even after a parry, you will have time to apply a bundle to your weapon. And with that crab dead, we get both a Titanite shard and a large Titanite shard. So again, not terrible loot, but also not necessarily worth it either. You can see here I'm using the black bow of Faris and the feather arrow so I can pull them from range. That way I can hide behind this tree pretty safely and avoid the ballista. Watch the grab attack. Anytime they rear up like that, go ahead and go in with a light attack so you can get that critical. But as you saw from the last crab, you can also get a critical just by staggering them from a few hits. There's another stagger. And another dead crustacean. And another Titanite shard. Like I said, I am going to speed up this video at some point, but apparently not yet. These kills are just too critical, I guess. Besides, if you know anything about giant crabs, you know just how much of a pivotal role giant crabs have played in feudal Japan history. Plus 5 internet points to anyone who actually gets that reference. Unintentional use of the bundle there, and another Titanite shard, and now it is time to actually get the ballista to destroy the next piece of architecture, and that is this very shoddy looking floor. Now this is completely optional, and we're not even going to use this hole, but once the ballista stops and we take a look down, if we were to hop in there, that is the next section that we'll be exploring, known as the Demon Ruins. This is a bit of a shortcut, I guess, but there is another way that also has a bonfire right at the beginning, which to me sounds a little safer. At this point, the crabs are clear, and while the ballista can see us right now, if we get a little bit closer to the wall, there we go, we should be safe, and now we can go and get this shiny hiding in the back of this cave. Although we are now exposed, so we can just use visual cues to know when to dodge. Perfect. Also, this wall is destructible, but there's really no reason to do it. There's nothing behind it or hidden underneath. But this shiny is a Chaos Gem. The Chaos Gem does require the Giant's Coal in order to be used by Andre. And when you use this to infuse a weapon, you'll get fire damage just as if you used a fire gem, but you also get intelligence and faith scaling. The scaling, just like we talked about at the beginning of the video, does depend on the type of weapon that you're upgrading, but as an example, the Historic Greatsword, the weapon that I'm currently using, does gain an AA scaling in both intelligence and faith when you infuse it along the Chaos path. And now let's speed things up, because for the next few minutes all I did was kill crabs. Titanite shard and a large shard. I said that I killed crabs during these couple of minutes. I didn't say I did it well. Another Titanite shard. And another shard. And another shard, and that is the last of the crabs. So now back to normal speed. And the problem is, while I might have gotten some souls and some upgrade materials from killing those crabs, not only did I not get any unique drops, but also I am now not at full health and I am out of Estus Flask. So I could go back to the bonfire and rest up, or I could go and explore this cave and probably meet my death. One crystal lizard here, and he'll drop a twinkling titanite for us. And then a second crystal lizard dead ahead. Now, occasionally, and even somewhat commonly, these crystal lizards will actually phase through the wall, and they'll fall out of the world and they'll die, but you'll still get their drops. Because I'm all out of my SS Flask, let's use medium heal just to get a little bit more health before we head in here and we meet with Horace. Which normally, he would just give us his typical but now, apparently that's no longer good enough. And he seems to have lost his mind and gone hollow. Oh, poor Horace. Horace is not too difficult, he's fairly easy to stagger, and he's also really fun to have jousting competitions with. But once you've killed him, you can pick up the Llewellyn Shield. This is actually a pretty good parry shield with decent absorption and stability for its weight, and it is classified as a small shield, so the parry window is actually pretty forgiving. Now, one thing to note is if you kill Horace here while Anri is still in the catacombs before you kill High Lord Wolnir, you can return to this spot and you can see a really cool shrine that Anri will actually set up using his broken halberd, his shield, and a prism stone. Because we actually already killed High Lord Wolnir, Anri is going to move on before we can tell her that we found Horace. On these corpses, we get a large shard here, another large shard here, and a couple of yellow bug pellets. Now, in the last episode, I asked you why you think yellow bug pellets would be found in the catacombs, and now we're seeing them here in the Smouldering Lake. That question is about to be answered. We'll be taking a look at the description of the yellow bug pellet when we encounter our next enemy. But before we encounter our next enemy, it's probably a good idea for us to top off our health and get our SS flasks back. So let's run back to the bonfire. A word of note here, this run is a little bit longer than I had remembered, so using a homeward bone would have been a lot more practical. Health restored, Estus Flask in hand. Let's head a little bit deeper into the Smouldering Lake. And finally start to understand why anyone would need lightning defense in such a smoldering place. One, two, and go. Running straight across. Let's use the visual cues for rolling times. And what is that screaming off in the distance? A giant worm. The Carthus sandworm. And if you can get a good look at him, you can actually see that this worm actually has the bodies and skeletons of a number of corpses spread all over its body. Now let's grab this item before we proceed. Just another large Titanite shard. Now let's watch out for the ballista. Now you can kill this enemy from range. You can use your bow and arrow, you can use spells if you can get close enough. You can sit next to him and use melee when he's not using his terrifying lightning attack. Oh yeah, by the way, that's why the yellow bug pellets are present in the catacombs. And I'm actually going to use one for its lightning defense properties. Now, while I don't look at the description, it does read, the Grave Wardens of Carthus use these to repel a great sand worm, who now lives in the Smoldering Lakes. And there you go. This worm actually used to be present in the catacombs, and the Grave Wardens were able to drive him off, so now that he lives in the Smoldering Lakes, that's why the yellow bug pellets are spread around, because other people have tried to fight him. But the safest way to deal with him is simply to run past, dodge the ballista, and then just get behind this rock wall. Because while it doesn't hit every time, every now and then, you'll see 349 damage being inflicted on the Carthus sandworm, and you don't have to do a thing. In fact, you can just take a rest. Now there is a theory that the Carthus sandworm is actually a former dragon slayer, or, even crazier, that this is actually Solaire. I don't necessarily believe either of those. I think maybe instead the Carthus sandworm swallowed a dragon slayer, and that is based on the fact that you get the lightning stake miracle when he dies. You also get an undead bone shard, which seems to signify a chosen undead. A lost dragon slaying miracle. This tale describes the lost practices of ancient dragon slayers who found that in order to pierce dragon scale, lightning should not be hurled as a bolt, but rather be thrust as a stake directly into the dragon's hide to be truly effective. When you use this miracle, you will slam a lightning bolt directly in front of your character. While it does have a small AoE field, the damage if hit directly can be very impressive. So no, I don't think that's Solaire. I don't think it's an old Dragon Slayer. I think that he might have just swallowed one. A couple more pieces of loot to get before we push on, including the Shield of Wan. And this is the other piece of evidence that I have for thinking that High Lord Wolnir might actually be the reincarnated King Vendrick. This is King Vendrick's shield. By the way, it's a phenomenal shield. Look at the absorptions and the stability. It is incredible. Shield of an ancient king who was cursed by an all-consuming thirst. In the end, he was no king. The residue of the king's lust still smolders within the shield, increasing the number of souls absorbed when enemies are defeated. If you have this shield out, any enemy that dies, you will get 20% more souls for every kill. Also, instead of parry or shield bash, this does have the weapon skill, so if you really like the weapon skill of your right-handed weapon and you want a very good shield, the Shield of Wan is a must. I think finding the shield here in the Smoldering Lake, along with the Black Blade and the Mad Warrior's armor description, there actually is a case for saying High Lord Wolnir is King Vendrick. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on my theory. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but I don't know. It kind of fits. And here's our bonfire. And not only do we have a bonfire, but you might have just heard that sound. And over there in the top right corner, we do have a summon sign. This summon is none other than Nightslayer Sorig. What's very interesting about this summon is you will fight Nightslayer Sorig in the next area of the Demon Ruins. And yes, you can actually summon Sorig to help you fight Sorig. Another mention on summons, because we are going to be pulling one in just a moment. The boss right here, behind that fog gate, is the only boss between the Smoldering Lake and the Demon Ruins. If you want help, be it a co-op partner or an NPC summon for the Demon Ruins, do not kill this boss. So I'm going to grab Great Swamp Cuculus and I'm going to run over here. We don't get any gesture from summoning Great Swamp Cuculus, but what we can get is Cornyx's armor and Cuculus's weapon, the Spotted Whip. The only caveat? She needs to survive this fight with us. Spoiler alert, she doesn't love surviving this fight with you. She can actually be a really good distraction, and she can heal quite a few times, but she also takes damage at a very rapid rate, which is why I grabbed the Medium Heal Miracle. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could help keep her alive. Well, let's take a look and see how that goes. And as you approach this crumpled demon in the center, he will awaken. By the way, you do have to actually engage the boss in order for Cuculus or any other summon to join you. And I'm going to use the Human Pine Resin because the demon is weak to dark damage. Not only is the Old Demon King weak to dark damage, but if you have a Black Knight weapon, because they are slayers of demons themselves, he will also take 20% bonus damage from the Black Knight weapons. You can see that he has a large variety of attacks, from large sweeping swings and fire breath, and then later on he'll even do some interesting things like calling down meteors or using fire rings. But this fight was actually dragged out a little bit, and I want to fast forward because, well, if Cuculus doesn't live, then I don't want to finish the fight because I do want to get the extra gear. And while Cuculus decided to stay a little bit too close for too long. Here I am running in with the medium heal. I get one off, which heals her a little bit. She is still staying a little bit too close without healing though, so I'm going to run in and try another heal. And in come the meteors. And there goes Cuculus. So at this point, I'm actually going to use a home bone and leave, because frankly, I want to beat this boss with Cuculus alive, which is easier said than done. So let's put some distance. Get hit one more time for good measure. And then very quickly get out of here. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that this is not my second attempt you're about to see. No. I had to attempt this fight a number of times. In fact, I think the grand total may have been 5. I even had to go back and restock on human pine resin, green blossoms, and homeward bones. Also, if you want to summon an NPC, make sure you're embered. Because yes, I did die. Alright, Cuculus, let's do it. Kind of an interesting note about Great Swamp Cuculus, and it's based on her name. She's likely a former apprentice of Cornyx. As you know, Cornyx does harp a lot about what is a teacher without a pupil, and it's possible and maybe even likely that Cuculus was his previous pupil. But Cuculus is actually a genus of cuckoos, a type of bird that are known for laying their eggs in the nests of other birds, and then their young will typically kick the eggs of the native nesting bird out of the nest. So my question is her name actually a reference to the true teacher-pupil relationship in pyromancy? Do pyromancer apprentices actually fight for attention from their teacher? Maybe even going so far as to killing other pyromancer pupils? I don't know. I don't think we have any direct evidence to suggest so other than her name. But FromSoft doesn't leave a whole lot to chance. You can see this fight is going a lot better than the first one, but here's that fire ring. Now the fire ring will either start directly underneath the old Demon King and then move out and then back, or it'll start outwards from the Demon King and then go in and then back out. So once you see the fire ring starting, it's better just to get far away and watch the ring go in and out before you actually go in for any more attacks. Reapplying our human pine resin. Cuculus is actually doing alright, except when she runs back into the fire ring a bit too early. Doing some good damage here. Okay, watch out for this AoE breath attack. Very good. You can see here, this is when he's actually summoning his meteors. And also, once you get him down to a very low amount of health, which is about to happen, you're going to want to run away. At this point, once he starts clutching like this, it's time to run. I was very lucky that Cuculus actually survived, because in one last-ditch effort, this dying demon actually uses all of his firepower in order to try to take you out with him. At this point, while he can still damage you, it's very unlikely. He is very slow, very pitiful, and it's time to put him out of his misery. Throwing on a few items here just to get some more souls. And we get the soul of the old Demon King, over 30,000 souls. And now let's take a look at that soul that we just got once we switch the items, because I don't want the symbol of avarice to kill us. The shriveled old Demon King is now like a clump of burnt ash, but he is the last living witness of the chaos of Izalith. He was actually born back in Izalith with the Bed of Chaos, and we're going to see that once we actually take a look at the items that his souls can get us. By the way, consuming the soul will get you 10,000 souls, or you can trade it for the Chaos Bed Vestige, or the Old King's Great Hammer. But now before we actually go back to Firelink Shrine, let's go back to the Undead Settlement where we first met Cornyx, because once you beat the old Demon King with Cuculus alive, that's where you can go find his gear. Heading back to some familiar stomping grounds, let's kill a couple of these citizens. Rolling into them will never get old. And over here we now have Cornyx's garb, wrap, skirt, and the spotted whip. The spotted whip does physical damage as well as apply poison effect. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but Cuculus was using the spotted whip as well as using the poison Miss Pyromancy, and she actually did manage to poison the old Demon King. Whip modeled with venomous looking spots favored by some female pyromancers of the Great Swamp. So it is interesting that this is specifically Cuculus's weapon, but we got Cornyx's armor. I don't know why we actually get both sets of gear, and if you have a theory, maybe it has something to do with what I mentioned earlier about Cuculus being a genus of cuckoos and kicking birds out of nests, or I don't know, run with it. Attire of Cornyx. In the Great Swamp, it was customary to adorn oneself with articles of nature. Cornyx favored the use of raven feathers. Ravens are said to have once been Firelink messengers, guiding the undead to the land of ancient gods, a very clear reference to leaving the undead asylum back in Dark Souls 1. Also, another way of actually getting Cornyx's attire is to kill him. But you're not heartless, right? First things first, remembering now to actually burn my undead bone shard. That might be a first. And now let's go talk to Ludleth, because we have 2 souls that we can now transpose.
Aha, thou returned, and a fine day it is. So
First item we come across is the Chaos Bed Vestiges, a very powerful pyromancy. Demons born from fire bore its smoldering essence and perished soon after. Man shares this rapport with the flames to this day. This is essentially the Forbidden Sun pyromancy from Dark Souls 2. This can do incredible damage with a direct hit, but it also does cause some damage along its edges. Then we also have the Demon's Great Axe from the Soul of a Demon. The demons, born of chaos, harbor fire, and yet they are twisted and malformed such that they were never meant to be. The Demonic Flare weapon skill can potentially deal a massive amount of damage with a good direct hit. It does share the Great Axe moveset, which makes it slow, but very powerful. And then the Old King's Great Hammer, with the soul of the Old Demon King. This weapon has survived since Old Izalith and is imbued with remnants of the Chaos Flame. Once again, another split damage weapon. And when you use the skill Molten Perseverance, you will slam the hammer into the ground 3 times, which will actually gain you poise and cause a small explosion. The explosion itself isn't particularly damaging, but the actual damage from the weapon itself can be very staggering at higher upgrade levels. And then we have the Demon's Fist, another split damage weapon just like the others we've seen, but this is a fist weapon. Wielding this in your left hand will allow you to perform a parry much like the Kestis, and then the Flame Whirlwind skill will hit multiple times. This can actually synergize well with either a ring or a pyromancy that actually increases the damage upon successful hits, or maybe one that actually restores health. Now, one last item that I actually don't show you is the Executioner's Armor Set, which belonged to Horace the Hushed. This is available at the Shrine Handmaid once you've actually killed him. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode, so I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave me a comment below, let me know what you learned, and if I missed something, as usual, you have to let me know that too so we can all keep learning. But I thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. I just remembered that I forgot all about Anri. He must be worried sick. Well, this is where we saw him. Now all we have is a prism stone. Henry?